I'm Catherine Hughes-Freytag, and I want to say hello and marhaba to everyone that's watching us and is part of this important webinar conference today. I'm Catherine Hughes-Freytag, and I'm the co-host tonight. And I'm also going to be co-hosting with Sean Connor from the International Peace Bureau. I'm the co-founder and the executive director of Solidarity 2020 and Beyond. We're a global network of seasoned grassroots activists and change makers working in 80 countries around the world, including a strong cohort in the Middle East, West Asia, which also includes Palestine and Israel. Solidarity 2020 and Beyond members lead campaigns and social justice movements on the issues of climate crisis, women's rights and gender-based violence, anti-authoritarian and anti-corruption initiatives, land and indigenous rights, and self-determination movements. The webinar conference today is the third in our series and is titled International Manifestation of Solidarity with the Palestinian People. It's brought to you by the Global Solidarity for Peace in Palestine, a coalition of organizations from around the world committed to defending the rights and liberation of the Palestinian people and ending apartheid and occupation. Our movement is built on the principles of justice, human dignity, and respect for international law. We always center Palestinian voices and include experts and leaders in the Palestinian solidarity movement. Our mission is to work for a just peace in Palestine-Israel, but we also understand the key connections with other struggles and movements in the region and around the world. But we're watching the recent ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel and Lebanon and the downfall of the Assad regime in Syria. And we know that they're all interconnected. We have a really full program today of eloquent speakers, and I think you're going to find the program highly engaging and educational. And we also plan to have time for Q&A from the audience as well, because we know a lot of you are experts in the field too. Basically, I want to now just let you know the organizations that are a member of our coalition. If I don't mention you, please put your name in the chat. And if you'd like to join us, because we've really grown over the last several months since we've gotten started, so we welcome everyone to be part of us. We have the Palestinian Youth Association for Leadership and Rights Activation, PILARA. We have Services and Advice for Peace, SERAPAZ, the World Social Forum, Pax Christi International, International Peace Bureau, Inter-American Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, INSPIRE, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflicts, Latin America Platform for Human Rights, Peace and Democracy, the International Council of the Oscar Arnulfo Romero Christian Solidarity Service, or CISCL, World Beyond War, Solidarity 2020 and Beyond, Weaponized Drone Ban Treaty Campaign, Peace Boat, Global Exchange, Justice and Peace Network of Latin America and the Caribbean, the Latin America Alliance for Disarmament and Social Justice, Peace and Justice Service, SERAPAZ from Mexico, and the International Fellowship of Reconciliation and for USA. So it's really an amazing and powerful group of organizations and networks that are part of this coalition. Now, it's my honor to introduce the founder of the Global Solidarity for Peace in Palestine Coalition, Miguel Alvarez of SERAPAZ. SERAPAZ is a civil organization created to support and continue the work of mediation in Chiapas and then to transfer what has been learned to other conflicts in Mexico and beyond. In 1994, Miguel was executive secretary of the National Commission for Mediation, which, presided by Bishop Samuel Ruiz, was guided by the lessons and approaches of Latin American liberation theology. Miguel is a mediator, winner of the National Human Rights Award in 2017, and he's a member of networks at all levels through SERAPAZ and has accompanied various conflicts and peace processes in 17 different countries around the world. And I want to welcome Miguel. Hola. And we are looking forward to your welcome and starting us off. Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you. Good morning, Good afternoon, good evening. I have problems with my video. I don't know what happened, but uh, let me add to what Catherine has perfectly said that this effort, even it's very short on time because we began the 2nd of September, it has been very generous, very creative, because it was born on the listening first to the Palestinians themselves. And after understanding their suffering, their proposal, their needs, we began an effort mostly horizontal, combining this kind of meetings, webinars, with the definition of concrete actions. We have done many all along these weeks, and and growing to more and more networks, uh, because we are convinced that if Gaza doesn't stop, the logic of war will come along for the whole world. So thank you for being here. This is a meeting of hearts, of solidarians, and of hopeful people. This week we are waiting to have news for a meeting with the General Secretary and the President of the General Assembly of the UN, because we found a way to help the Assembly General to decide under the Security Council. So we hope we are on time to make possible this ceasefire and then begin in the build of conditions for stopping the wars and open path for peace. Thank you, very, very welcome. But
Thank you so much, Miguel, for those words of introduction. And I think that will launch directly into a bit of what I'll share with you before passing on to our next speaker. But quickly, just to introduce myself, my name is Sean Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the International Peace Bureau, a Nobel Peace Laureate organization and international network of peace and peace-related organizations in over 100 countries, raising a global voice against war and for disarmament and for development and a just peace. So briefly, I would like to share with you the important developments and achievements of this coalition just in this past week that Miguel began to mention there. This past Friday, the 13th of December, we sent 2 letters to His Excellencies the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Mr. Philemon Yang, the President of the General Assembly of the UN. The letters requested that both the Secretary General and the President urge member states UN representatives to implement the General Assembly Resolution A-ES-10/L. Sorry, Miguel, can you mute yourself quickly? Thank you. So just to repeat, the General Assembly Resolution A/ES-10/L.31/revision 1. I'll explain briefly what that means and how it relates, but this was passed on the 17th of December this year, and it calls for an end to Israel's occupation of the Occupied Palestinian Territories, or OPT, and for the implementation of the ICJ's advisory rulings. The General Assembly holds special importance in the light of the 1950 Resolution 377 called Uniting for Peace. Sorry, do I have to speak up a little bit? Am I a bit quiet for others? Yes, I'll try to speak a bit louder here. Hopefully it helps. Sorry about that. It's some technical issues, I imagine, from my side. So the 1950 Resolution 377 Uniting for Peace, which allows the General Assembly to take action when the Security Council is incapable of fulfilling its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. As a result of the General Assembly resolution, as previously mentioned, and the ICJ advisory rulings, they serve as a basis for immediate action by UN member states. To briefly summarize, the actions included are promoting the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, asserting the illegality of and refusing to aid in the Israeli presence in the OPT, including economically, refusing recognition to any physical or demographic change in the territory occupied by Israel on the 5th of June 1967, including East Jerusalem, undertaking efforts to end systemic discrimination against Palestinian people and supporting accountability for the victims, and speaking out against Israel's breaches of international law, the UN Charter, and UN resolutions in agencies such as UNRWA, and recognition that the Israeli state must be held accountable. Beyond the resolution, we made further calls to reopen the Committee Against Apartheid in the case of Israel, to demand an arms embargo, to strip Israel of its right to vote in the General Assembly, and to establish an unarmed UN peacekeeping mission in the OPT, applying Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. These letters were submitted with over 100 co-signing organizations, and we have spread a press release quite widely. The goal is to mobilize both governments and civil society around pushing for the following resolution and in compliance with international law. This was a massive effort with many in the coalition to thank, our next speaker in particular for her expertise on the international law and guiding us in the drafting of these letters. This is Ms. Phyllis Bennis, a fellow at the Transnational Institute and the director of the Institute for Policy Studies New Internationalism Project, focusing on the Middle East, Palestinian rights, U.S. militarism, and UN issues. A little further background on Phyllis Bennis. In 2001, she helped to found the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and more recently spent 6 years on the board of Jewish Voice for Peace, which she now serves as an international advisor. She has written popular books, including Understanding the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict, updated in 2019, Before and After, U.S. Foreign Policy and the War on Terror, and Challenging Empire, How People, Governments, and the UN Defy U.S. Power. Without further ado, then, Phyllis Bennis, the floor is to you.
Thanks very much, and thanks all of you for being here this morning, tonight, this afternoon, and thanks to the organizers for pulling us all together. We're working through a very, very difficult time right now. The genocide in Gaza is continuing and indeed escalating. Israel is escalating its regional land grabs in the West Bank, in Syria, in Lebanon, and now talking and, in fact, acting to build new military bases inside Gaza, implying a future of permanent occupation. And yet we have seen massive shifts in the discourse, in public discourse, in the media discourse, most explicitly in the United States, but throughout the global North. It is not yet catching up to the global South, but there are massive changes among the populations in these most powerful countries. When we talk about the role of international law and international institutions in this context, we're talking about the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. I think it's really important to recognize that while the positions and the decisions of those institutions are very, very important, and the role of our governments in either enabling or preventing those institutions from doing their job, the real enabler of genocide that must be stopped to make Israel stop is not the United Nations, it's the United States. But what we know from the history of the South African apartheid period, the movement against apartheid, which was true in the movement against South African apartheid and is true today in the movement against Israeli apartheid, is that decisions made by the United Nations, both those that are officially advisory, like the decisions of the General Assembly, or those that are supposed to be binding, like those of the Security Council, none of them are actually binding until there is pressure from us, from social movements, from civil society on our governments to demand that they enforce international law, that they abide by these resolutions, which otherwise governments can simply dismiss without any consequence. So when we're talking about that, the pressure on the United States remains the most important thing. But the role of other governments is very important. What we saw in the South Africa period was that once other governments around the world, starting with governments in the global South, but eventually throughout Europe and elsewhere, governments were pressured by their own populations to abide by UN resolutions calling for various kinds of sanctions against apartheid South Africa, banking sanctions, arms embargoes, all of those things. And eventually, it took far too long, but eventually the United States felt enough pressure because all these other countries, including all of its allies, were finally coming out against South African apartheid. They felt they had to do it, and that enabled the actions in the United States in 1986 to finally come out with sanctions against South Africa. A similar situation is required today, where we need these decisions to be made by the United Nations to give us a tool to pressure our own governments. That's our job. That's our job. The influence that we have on the institutional components of the UN is not very much. It's something, but it's not that much. Where we can really bring that pressure is on our own governments to follow, to abide by these resolutions that have been taken that are not self-enforcing. So let me start briefly with the role of the International Court of Justice. That's been by far the most important set of events over this last 14 months. The first, of course, had to do with the significance, of course, has to do with South Africa being the country that brought charges against Israel for Israeli violations of the International Covenant against Genocide. It wasn't the first time a country of the Global South had used the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, but it was the first African country, and it was the first time that it was taken with this kind of global significance because of the moral position that South Africa claimed based on its own struggle against apartheid. So South Africa sued Israel for violating the International Covenant against Genocide. That covenant is a very specific piece of international law. I'm not going to go through all the details. We can get into it more in questions if people want to. But essentially, it says that you need two things. You need this to show that there is the specific intent to destroy a group or part of a group that's defined by race, by religion, by language, by ethnicity, by a host of other social constructs. And that to carry out that intent, to carry out that effort to destroy all or part of a group, you need to commit at least one of 5 separate acts, which we can get into. The initial ruling of the ICJ was that Israel's actions in Gaza were plausibly genocide. And they imposed 6 provisional measures, which if you read them, although they didn't use the language, the word ceasefire, they essentially called for a ceasefire. Because what they called for was an end to any actions by Israel, and specifically to prevent the Israeli military from carrying out any of the 5 violent actions that are prohibited under the convention, which include killing people and injuring people. So it was, in fact, a call for ceasefire without using that word. It also is important because those resolutions, those decisions by the court are considered binding, both on Israel as the defendant nation and on member states who are signatories and states party to the Genocide Convention. What that means is that the United Nations was being called on then to implement how that was going to take forward, how that was going to come forward.
Just very quickly, 2-minute warning.
Okay, very short. I'm going to skip ahead. That's been the most important. The International Court of Justice also gave its advisory opinion, which we heard about, which again needs the United Nations to implement. That is on the need to end apartheid, to end occupation, and to remove as fast as possible all the illegal settlers. The UN General Assembly, which is by far the most important and most democratic component of the United Nations, but not the most powerful, they took it up after the Security Council vetoed these resolutions, calling for a ceasefire, calling under Uniting for Peace. They took these resolutions. This has been in place on the question of Palestine since 1997. The Uniting for Peace precedent has been in place for almost 30 years now. But again, it requires pressure on the governments of the General Assembly. That means us in our own countries. That's the most important work, to pressure the United Nations, far more than anything else we do directly with all of our important work around letters and protests at the UN, those are all important. But the most important thing is to pressure our own governments to make real the significance of these resolutions. Finally, on the question of what it actually could look like, it means that individual countries can impose sanctions on Israel that then become a model for others. There are already a number of countries that have imposed arms embargoes, but most of those countries are still continuing to buy from Israel. They're not selling arms to Israel, but that doesn't really have much impact on Israel because it doesn't need arms from most countries around the world because it gets more than 75% of its arms from the United States. What it does mean is that they are still buying, countries, including very progressive governments, are buying surveillance equipment in particular from Israel, which is a huge component, a very important component of the Israeli economy. So pressure to stop the purchase of Israeli goods at the strategic level, these kinds of surveillance instruments and related things, is a very important component of all of this. And finally, I would just say that what we have been given through these decisions by the General Assembly in both its resolutions of July and in September, both in response to the ICJ's advisory opinion, making clear that the Israeli occupation itself and that Israeli apartheid are illegal, and the decision in September about the need to implement the decision of the ICJ on the Genocide Convention, these are now tools for our work in our own countries. And I hope that all of us that are part of this global coalition will take that up in a unified way to pressure our own governments to make real on these decisions by the United Nations. Without us, without that pressure, United Nations resolutions fall into history, and they don't have that immediate impact. They can have an impact when we fight for it, as we did around South Africa, and we must do it now around Israel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I know over the years you're one of my go-to experts in the Middle East and Palestine, Israel. We really appreciate you advising our new coalition, and hopefully, I'm sure there are going to be some Q&A for you at the end. So I'm going to now turn it back to David Swanson, World Beyond War. And David, I am going to ask you to introduce our video clip coming up around some of the arms embargo work and direct action that is that is happening right now around the world. And yeah, and we know that it's mainly in English. And so for those non-English speakers, you can kind of let us know what we're going to see. And then it's a very motivational video clip. So go ahead, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and wonderful job by Phyllis and everyone. And this is about a 6-minute quick compilation of photos and videos from recent direct actions that various of our groups have been part of that in many cases are winning divestment and arms embargoes and partial arms embargoes and are very much needed to compel governments to do what we're asking them to do at the UN General Assembly. This starts out with a minute or two of people talking about a direct action they did in England. It then goes to a bunch of photos and videos from the United States and Canada, actions that in Canada have won a partial arms embargo, not the two-way arms embargo that Phyllis was mentioning. That is, Canada is buying weapons from Israel, and not the indirect arms embargo. Canada sells all kinds of weapons parts to the United States, which then puts them into deadly weapons and sells them to Israel. It then includes also some photos from Australia and ends with a video of a very recent action in Canada where a group of Jewish activists effectively shut down a building full of parliamentarians' offices and made a great deal of news around their demands. So I will play the video. If something seems unclear, I will try to clarify it while the video is playing.
At the beginning of Palestine action, there was the authorities were reluctant to take activists to court because they didn't want to shed light on the kind of murderous enterprise that they are running. But as time went by, and we in Palestine Action managed to create a critical mass of people willing to take action and putting their body on the line, the authorities are more willing to drag us to court and take away our defenses in law. When we went to court, we couldn't argue for protection of life and necessity and urgency, all of which were factors in why we've taken the action. After a 4-week trial, we were found guilty without being able to present the full motivation of what we take in action.
This genocide was in the cards. It was only a matter of time. What has happened back then is that there was already like high tension and people were already being targeted in the West Bank. Shireen Abu Akleh, the journalist, was murdered just a couple of days before our action. And the intention was to stop the manufacturing and the shipment of those murder machines to Israel for as long as we could.
As I see the entire instrument of law, as it is formulated, is the instrument of the strong. So the authorities have ultimate power. They have state power and they can use it in any way they want. But that is not something that deters me personally, because we are talking here about the most severe crimes. They are talking about the crime of genocide. My soul has not been so abused that I have forgotten that my basic duty is to care for my brothers and sisters. Our blood is already mixed with the blood of Palestinians. We are all in the same struggle. And if we have to go to prison, that's just a continuation of the struggle. If we are not taking action, we are far worse than going to prison. We carry the prison within ourselves.
Say no to war. No to war. Why are we
Section 21950 CVC and 21954 CVC. You are ordered to leave the roadway immediately, or you are subject to arrest under Section 2800.
Pull the trigger, kill each other. Where is the love? Politician, Mr. Preacher Man, show us the light. People fighting, dying, you're watching like it's a movie. But why? Blood is flowing, staining the righteousness of us. Oh, why? Hearts are heartless, souls are soulless. Life is lifeless, full of emptiness. This is madness. Where's your conscience? No to war, say no to war. Hey mama, hey. No to war, hey mama, hey. Why are we fighting? Hey mama, hey. Stop the fighting. Is it the money, show of might? Have mercy, please. Is it religion, race? We all human race, sons and daughters of Mother Earth. Let's don't disgrace our mama. You're my brother, sister, cousin. You're my neighbor, my friend. We have our differences, sort out the differences in peaceful ways. Respect each other, love one another. Unite and say no to war. Hey mama, hey, no to war. Hey mama, hey, why are we fighting? Hey mama, hey, stop the fighting. If you stand up for peace, let me hear you say yeah, 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 yeah. If you stand up for peace, let me hear you say yeah.
and allies have just launched a protest inside the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa to demand Canada stop arming Israel. We're joined now by Rachel Small, a member of the group Jews Say No to Genocide Coalition. Rachel, can you describe where you are and what you're doing and what you're calling for?
Thank you. We are in a Parliament Hill building right now. We have completely taken over the lobby of this building that has hundreds of parliamentarians' office in here. Our demand is clear. Canada needs to stop arming Israel and implement an immediate arms embargo. We know that every F-35 fighter jet, every Boeing Apache helicopter dropping bombs on Lebanon and Gaza right now still have hundreds of Canadian components. We're here as Jews to say this violence cannot continue in our name. And we're here as people of conscience to say that the absolute bare minimum Canada needs to be doing right now is stop arming a genocide.
So hopefully a little inspiration from creative actions that are in many cases winning victories, preventing weapons fairs, getting arms embargoes, getting divestment, and inspiring others to do the same.
Thank you, David. And a lot of people are asking in the chat if they could get copies of the video so that they can kind of take more time to view it and also to share with others. So we'll definitely be able to get you a copy when we send out the recording. And it is really motivational. And to me, these people power efforts, really putting people's bodies on the line is what we need to do and escalate. And it does give me hope as well. So bravo to all of the people out there, including many of us in this meeting that are
Catherine,
doing that.
can I cut you off real quick?
Yes.
We're having an issue. The Spanish interpreter is currently translating into Spanish on the English channel. So just a note to the interpreters, please make sure to go to the Spanish channel so that the correct audience can hear in the language they need.
Thank you, Sean. Hopefully we can get that figured out. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Mazen Kumsiye. He's my friend. He's a current also comrade in struggle over the years, and he's a Palestinian scientist, author, and activist who teaches and conducts research at Bethlehem and Birzeit universities in the West Bank. He previously served on the faculties of the University of Tennessee, Duke, and Yale universities. He and his wife returned to Palestine in 2008, starting a number of institutions and projects, such as the Clinical Genetics Laboratory that serves cancer and other patients. They founded the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University, and also the Palestine Natural History Museum in Bethlehem. And many of us have been there to volunteer over the years. It's an amazing project. Kumsiye also published over 140 scientific papers, and his many published books include The Bats of Egypt, The Mammals of the Holy Land, The Sharing the Land of Canaan, Human Rights and Israel-Palestine Struggle, and Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment. He also published hundreds of articles and letters to the editor and has given hundreds of talks in 45 countries around the world. We're really lucky to have him today with us, Mazen, because he is just finishing up a really intense speaking tour in the US, and he had recently has visited Australia, UK, and New Zealand, doing everything he can to keep the struggle on the ground going, but also to build international solidarity to end the genocide and the occupation of Palestine. Go ahead, Mazen.
Thank you very much, Catherine. This is fantastic. And first, I must start by telling you that what my friends in Gaza tell me, who are living in tents and are under the rain, at least they have drinking water, but they're freezing to death and have no food, and everything is impossible. And there's more people in Gaza are dying now from starvation and from lack of medical services than those who are dying from direct bombing by Israel. There's estimates of 300,000 people in Gaza who died as a result of these causes in the past year or so. We do some research on these things. We also do some research on the ecocide of Gaza. So there's a genocide in Gaza, but there's also an ecocide. We just finished some research, for example, that shows the destruction of the tree cover in Gaza and the greenhouses in Gaza using remote sensing. And in the North Gaza region, the tree cover has been decimated at about 94% of trees. And the same with greenhouses in North Gaza, and the same damage is coming to South Gaza now. So there's an ecocide. There's also medicide, as you know, the destruction of healthcare services in Gaza. And this has been almost complete, basically, with very, very few things left. 3 out of 36 main hospitals in Gaza are remaining partially functioning. In addition to the medicide, we have a scholasticide in Gaza, destruction of the educational system in Gaza. The universities have all essentially been destroyed or rendered out of service, but you know, thousands and thousands of university students are out without education for the past 13 months. Same for schools, regular schools, including UNRWA schools, etc. So one could call that scholasticide or educide. There's also veriticide, if you want, the killing of the truth, where you know, Israel massacres the truth globally, lying to their teeth about what's going on and all what happened. If people here want to know more about Gaza, they can read, they can go to the website ongaza.org, which I'll put in the chat room. But I'll also put my email in the chat room if you want to be on our email list. There is now 62,000 people on this email list, so feel free to join the email list where we report on what's going on the ground. I also add a term I just learned yesterday from Norman Solomon's article that he coined the term omnicide. Omnicide is basically destruction of human civilization globally. This is coming to us unless we address the issue of what's happening in Palestine, because it could lead to a global war. In fact, we see the beginnings of it with the regional war and a global war. Next global war, there's not going to be human winners and losers. There will be basically nuclear annihilation, and that will mean that you know, our civilization ends. And I say our civilization, it's human civilization. There's no separate civilizations, plural, so to speak, because we're all interconnected, as you know, on this planet. That is provided, of course, that this is not ended by climate change also. So we face a lot of dangers, and these things are connected, by the way. Even climate change, the military is one of the largest producer of greenhouse gases globally. Israel actually produced more greenhouse gases in the last 13 months from jet fuel alone, just flying and bombings over 1.1 million flights over Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and other places. Just from jet fuel alone, they produced more greenhouse gases than any major European country produced from all its sources of greenhouse gases, industries, automobiles, etc. So this is what we call omnicide. War is an omnicide, and it is getting to killing our planet. That's why the urgency, that's why the video you showed shows the urgency. I like the statement that was made in it, that if we don't act, even if we go to prison, it's a bigger problem because the prison will be within us. because it's our responsibility. And not only that, but we are basically resulting in mass suicide if we don't act. So we must act, all of us must act on this. In Palestine,
I just want to give you a 2-minute warning.
yeah, sure, 1 minute is needed actually.
No, we'd love 2. We want to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, so in Palestine, what are we doing? I mean, I lost over 25 people in the West Bank and many more in Gaza, my own friends that I know who were killed, and my friends in Gaza text me, remaining friends in Gaza who text me daily about their misery and starvation and cold and all of this stuff that they're undergoing. And I go back to Palestine in a day or two. I'm heading to Amman today, and tomorrow I go to, to reach Amman. But anyways, we started this Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. The website is PalestineNature.org. It's an institute that's concerned with sustainable human and natural communities. So we work diligently with mostly volunteer effort, and you're welcome, any of you, to volunteer with us. Email me, as I said, I put my email in the chat room, or go to PalestineNature.org to see how you can help volunteer, donate, or support our work to ensure that our people in Palestine remain resilient and remain connected to the land and can grow their own vegetables and fruits and things like that. We're even now managing to smuggle seeds into Gaza, etc. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's much work to be done on the ground. So in addition to protesting the darkness, please also light candles, help people on the ground, and come volunteer with us. I invite you to come to Palestine and visit us and see the situation for your eyes. Thank you very much for hosting this, for the wonderful work. I mean, that is really inspiring around the world. Hundreds of millions of people are mobilizing. It is existential for the whole world, and that's why we say in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians in demonstrations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mazen. I've tried to fix my volume. Hopefully you can hear me a little bit better than before, but just in case, I'm still going to speak loudly. But Mazen, thank you for going into really the wide impacts of Israel's continued bombardment and genocide, including an omnicide. And we also acknowledge that you've just gotten off a several-week speakers tour and that you're quite exhausted. And thank you for the time that you've had to come and join us here as well. We really appreciate that, as well as, of course, your personal insights. So just a deep appreciation for you. We will now move on to our next speaker. We have Mohammed Abu Asi, who is a media professional who lived in Rafah, Gaza, until he was forcibly displaced to Cairo in 2024. He earned a bachelor's degree in radio and television at Palestine University and has facilitated numerous local and international conferences as a volunteer with the Palestinian Youth Association for Leadership and Rights Activation, or PLRA. He participated also in emergency interventions to help displaced people and alleviate suffering. Mohammed, thank you so much for being with us, and I turn the floor over to you.
You're welcome, my friend. السلام عليكم جميعا. شكرا على
Peace be
تواجدكم
upon you
اليوم.
all. Thank you for your
شكرا
presence
على
today.
إتاحتكم الفرصة إلنا
Thank you for
لنتحدث
giving me the
عن هاي
opportunity
القضية
to
وهاي
speak
المعاناة المستمرة
about
على
this
مدار
particular
سنة وأكثر.
cause and this
سنة
ongoing
وأكثر
suffering
من
since more than a year,
الإبادة
more
الجماعية
than a year
كما
of
يجب أن
genocide,
نسميها جميعا يعني.
as we should be calling it.
الآن بدي أبدأ بإنه
Now I would
أحاول
start,
قدر المستطاع بإني
I would
أتحدث
try as much as I can
وأوجز في
to
حديثي
speak
لأنه
and
الوقت لا يسمح طبعا بعد
to
هاي
be
المعاناة
brief,
كلها.
because time would not allow,
لسه بعد
after
دقائق
all the
كافية
suffering, of
ولكن
course, time
أحاول
I don't have
أوجز
enough
في
time,
كلامي.
but I will try to
الشباب
keep it short.
الغزي الحصار المفروض عليه
The Gaza
منذ
youth
قرابة
under siege
18 عام كان
since
بشكل
more
عائق
than
أساسي على
18
تقدمهم
years
في البلاد
has been the main obstacle
والشباب
for their
الفلسطيني
progress
أيضا
in
بشكل عام
their own country, the
وكأنه ما
Palestinian youth as a
ينقصهم
whole
هو
in general.
هذه الحرب
And
اللي
as
أتت
if
وغيرت
that's what
ملامح
they need.
كل
This
شيء
is the word that they need and that have changed
من
everything.
بعد هذه الأحداث أنا بداية كنت
After such
سكان مدينة
events,
غزة
I
بعد
used to live in Gaza. I used
الأحداث
to be a
بعدة
Gaza
أيام أو بعد
citizen
أكثر من
after the
أسبوع
only a few days
بعد
or
أخذ
maybe
نارية
more than a
شديدة
week
في
after
المنطقة اللي
the
بسكن فيها اضطررنا لمغادرة
uh,
غزة
there
إلى
has
مدينة
been
رفح جنوبا
severe shelling of
وهنا بدأت
against
واخر
the city of
الطرق
Gaza. So
اللي
we
ممكن
were
يخطوها
displaced. We
أي
had to
إنسان
move
في
to
أي حال
southern
إنه ينزح
Rafah,
ويخرج من
and this is
منزله
the
تحت
most
ضربات النار
difficult
إنك تخرج
experience to
مجبر
leave your
بعد ما كنت معزز
home,
مكرم
to be
في
forced to leave
منزل
your home after you've been
فتتحول
feeling
وتعيش في
good in a
خيمة
house, in a
حيث
warm house,
يعني
to end up living
انعدام
in a tent, to be
لمقومات
forced to
الحياة
live, to
الأساسية
move to another
كنت
area, to live in a
عايش من
tent where
غير
you don't have
كهرباء
the
من غير
daily life
إنترنت من
basics,
غير
to live
مياه
without
من غير
power, without
طعام
internet, without
من
water,
غير أدنى
food,
مقومات الراحة
nothing,
والنظافة
even
أو
the
مقومات
basic
النظافة الشخصية
needs, the even comfort
فبالتالي هاي
and
الحرب
the hygiene, the personal
اللي,
hygiene.
اللي كان
So
فيها
this
كل
war
أشكال الإبادة الجماعية
that
اكتملت فيها
had
وأركانها اللي بيحصل فيها
all
تطهير
forms of
جسديا
genocide,
واللي الاحتلال
when
بيقوم
that is meant
بالقتل
for as an
في
ethnic
خلالها
cleansing.
وبحكي لك
The
على
occupation
الجانب
is
الغربي على
lying,
سبيل المثال حيث
saying that
المنطقة
they went
الآمنة
to the southern, for example,
ولكن في
southern
قطاع
part
غزة
where the
لا
area
يوجد
is safe,
مناطق
but
آمنة
whereas
وهو
Gaza,
يدعي
there are
أنه
no
هذه
safe
المناطق هي
areas.
مناطق آمنة
They
ولكن
claim that these
جميعنا
areas are
نرى من
safe.
خلال
However,
متابعتنا
we all know
بأنه
and we see
المناطق
from
التي
our
يدعي
follow-up
الاحتلال
from our
أنها مناطق
that all
آمنة
the areas
هي مناطق
under
هي
the
يتم
occupation
استهدافها
claims
أكثر
as
من
being
المناطق
safe are
الأخرى
being targeted
وعدد الشهداء
even more
الموجود في
than other
المناطق التي
areas.
يدعي
And the number
الاحتلال
of
أيضا أنها
martyrs
مناطق آمنة
or those killed that
تقريبا
they claim
مساوي
in these safe
للمناطق اللي
areas
هو
is
بيعتبرها
about equal the
مناطق خطر
number of those
ف
killed in what they
والشيء هذا ملحوظ
consider
من
war
استهدافه
zones.
للمدنيين
And
استهدافه
this is,
للطواقم
of course,
الطبية
very obvious how they
استهدافه
target the
للصحفيين
civilians, how they target the medical staff, the
هذا
paramedics, and
بالنسبة
journalists. This is in
لهذه
terms
النقطة
of
خلوني أتحدث عن
the
رحلة خروجي من القطاع
this particular
برضو
issue
عشان أسيب هذا
about my
المحور
journey
لزميلي
leaving
وزميلي
the
مهدي
Gaza Strip.
يتحدث فيه باستفاضة أكثر
I want my colleague Mahdi to
رحلة
speak more
خروجي
about
من
this, but
القطاع بدأت
my
بعد ما
journey,
الاحتلال أقدم
my
على اقتحام
departure
مدينة
journey
رفح
started after the
وهنا
occupation
أنا وعائلتي بدأنا نفكر
broke
وإنه
into the
إحنا خلاص لازم
city of
نخرج من
Rafah.
القطاع
This is when
خصوصا
my
بعد
family and I started to
معاناتنا في
think
عدم
about
إيجاد
leaving the Gaza
مكان
Strip
بديل
after our
للذهاب إليه
suffering,
أنت
not
الآن
finding
الاحتلال داخل
a
رفح
substitute
احتل أصلا
place to
بالعاصمة
head
من
up to.
البداية
The occupation
فبالتالي
in the
لم يعد
northern
هناك
part
مكان
is
نذهب إليه
besieged. So
إلا إذا
there's no
أردنا أن
place
نعيش
for
في
us to
الشارع أو
go
على
to
شط البحر
unless we want to live in the
هذا
on the
شيء
street
كان
or on
مستحيل
the beach,
فبالتالي
which is
بدأنا
something
بالتفكير
that
بالسفر
was impossible. So we started
سافرنا
to think about
أو
leaving.
خليني
So we
أحكي
left.
أنا سافرت في البداية في نهاية شهر
I
4
left at
وكان
the
من
beginning,
المفترض
end of
إنه أهلي
April.
يجوا بعدي
I was, my family were
لدولة
supposed to
مصر
follow
الشقيقة
me
كان من
to come
المفترض
to
أهلي يكونوا
Egypt.
موجودين معي بعدي
They were supposed
ولكن
to
للأسف
be with me.
أغلق المعبر
However,
أغلق
and
المعبر
unfortunately, the
قبل دخول
crossing was
جمهورية مصر
closed
العربية
down
والاحتلال
before
اقتحم
they were
المعبر
able to
وبالتالي
exit
أصبح
and
المعبر
come
مغلق
into the
فانفصلنا عن
to
بعض
Egypt, and thus
أهلي لا زالوا متواجدين
we were
في
separated.
غزة
My family are
وأنا موجود
still
هون
in
في
Gaza,
جمهورية مصر
and I'm
العربية
here in Cairo,
ولما بدنا
Egypt.
نتحدث عن أوضاع الشباب الفلسطيني
When we want to
الموجود
speak
الآن
about
في
the
جمهورية مصر
situation of the
العربية
Palestinian youth
من بعد
in
أحداث يوم
Cairo or in
الأحد
Egypt
السابع
as a whole after
من شهر
after
أكتوبر
October 7,
لما بدنا نشوف التفاصيل وبدنا ندقق فيها
when we look into the
هنلاحظ
details
إنه
or to
العالم
get
بيكيل
to,
بمكيالين
we would
عند
we would
النظر
see the
لبعض
double
البلاد
standard
ما تم
of
تقديمه
the world when we
للأشخاص
look
اللي
at certain
اضطروا على
countries, what have
مغادرة
been
بلادهم
provided to
بسبب الحرب
individuals who had to leave their
ترى
country
تضامن
because of the
حقيقي
war.
تشعر
You
بوجود
would see
إنسانية حقيقية
a real solidarity.
لكن
We
عندما
feel that there there is real humanity. But when it comes to the Palestinian young youth or the Gazan youth, this is a right that has been taken away. The right to live peacefully and securely in their own land. They can't enjoy this, and they can't enjoy any right, any human rights. They are forced to leave due to the genocide that has never been done in the history, even though all the international laws maintain the laws of those who depart their countries to find or to achieve the security and peace and to avoid any kind of danger similar to the danger on Gaza without any discrimination based on race, religion, or place of origin, etc., without any kind of discrimination. This is the kind of right they need to enjoy, despite all these international laws that guarantee this law and that the international institutions urge for this or call for this right. We see the double standard handing or treatment against the Palestinians who were forced to leave because of the war. It's different. It's completely different when you compare to other nationalities or other countries. If I want to address the conditions of the Palestinian youth here in Egypt, life here in Egypt, they tried a different kind of difficulties or hardships. It's a different experience, actually. They understand that their suffering would never stop after they left, after they departed, or the youth are trying to experience different kinds of sufferings and new kinds of sufferings, aside from the bad experience that we had to live and we are still living, and the negative or passive feelings and the inner emotions that this war is still ongoing and would never end. There are other problems or issues in addition to the mental aspect. There are issues linked to you departing your homeland, your displacement, or leaving your own homeland.
Mohammed, just to give you a quick 2 minutes remaining in what to say. 2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes remaining.
اوكي اي نو ف انا بحكي انه الحياه برا مختلفه وتجربه مختلفه.
So life outside is a different experience. The suffering of the Palestinian youth has never stopped. Outside the country, there is no legal residency for the Palestinians. They're not being offered any residency because they left the war. We are being treated as guests. And thus, there's no opportunity for progress or achievement in our professional life. And therefore, this is an obstruction of our life. The lack of residency or citizenship has led to other problems, such as the inability to travel abroad, because the majority states would ask you or require that you access residency or an ID to even moving inside the country and not being able to get this residency. These residency rights would prevent you from moving to many places. This also impede your professional progress because the job opportunities in the companies has or necessitate that you have to have an ID or residency, and which is completely difficult. And because of that, many youth had to go to the free work or job platforms, and those who have experience or have the expertise are the only ones who can make some progress. The lack of residency, you are being forced to commit to all your duties as a citizen in this country without accessing the least rights, whether in health rights, educational rights, or work rights, or any other life aspects. I would conclude saying that the Palestinian who left their country after this aggression on the Gaza Strip are being treated as a guest who should leave the minute the war ends. It's not clear it's not clear when this war would end in Palestine, anywhere. Wherever you are, the Palestinian has to experience new conditions and emotions, has to wait without knowing what is the end to all this or when this end would happen. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mohammed, for highlighting really a number of important issues, including double standards around refugees, including your personal story, which I think has touched all of our hearts. And we do hope that you and your family are united quite soon here. And yeah, just one more time, a huge thank you for being able to join us for the call today. Quickly, before I move on to the next presenter, just to say, we realize we're cutting our speakers off quite strictly at 7 minutes. This is so that we can have time at the end for the Q&A session. So I just want to remind you, if you do have questions you're thinking of as you go, feel free to write them into the chat. So when we get to the Q&A, we can immediately jump into answers to some of these questions. So just to remind you of all of that, and we have 2 speakers left now. So I would like to introduce our next, actually 3 speakers, 2 of them together here though. We have Cindy and Craig Corey, the parents of human rights activist and observer Rachel Corey, who in 2003 was killed by the Israeli military in Rafah in the Gaza Strip, as she tried to prevent the demolition of a Palestinian family's home. Since Rachel's killing, her family has strived to continue the commitment to the Palestinian people and to Palestine that she intended. Cindy and Craig, thank you for being with us today, and I turn the words over to you now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to those of you who have organized for this event for Palestinian rights. When my daughter Rachel Corrie was killed in Gaza in 2003, as she stood to prevent the demolition of a Palestinian home, it was a comfort to me that she had written that going to Palestine was the most important thing she had done in her nearly 24-year lifetime. Rachel had responded to a call from the International Solidarity Movement, ISM, a Palestinian-led movement to resist the systematic oppression and dispossession of the Palestinians. She agreed to ISM principles, to working alongside Palestinians and to use only nonviolent direct action methods of resistance. She documented human rights and international law violations that were being committed by the Israeli military. She planned for how to share what she had learned when she returned home and how to maintain a commitment to the Palestinian friends and colleagues she'd come to know in Gaza. Rachel wrote about and was learning so much about how to be in solidarity. After a dreadful, costly year marked by the destruction of so much human life, property, and land in Gaza, and in the US, the loss of any belief in our government's ability to respond to Gaza in a moral, ethical way, I think many of us have questions about how to effectively be in solidarity with those who are suffering most. Today, the genocide, as we've heard in Gaza, continues. And the UN Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA, reports that in the West Bank this year, there have been nearly 1,000 Palestinian fatalities, including 210 children. 49 Israelis have been killed this year in the West Bank, including 8 children and 18 Israeli military. For those of us who will celebrate Christmas in just 10 days, it's sad to note that since October 7th, 2023, 24 Palestinian fatalities and 805 injuries are reported in Bethlehem, and 113 settler attacks have occurred in the Bethlehem area. That's only a fraction of the settler attacks that have occurred throughout the West Bank. In the US, at least, much of this has gone largely unnoticed. I search for what colleagues in the West Bank have been saying about all of this. One friend shared that the economy is terrible, that tourism is down, and one thing that would help would be for internationals to visit. He added that visitors coming to the region now are largely from the Christian far right in the US, who support the Israeli government and settler movement. Currently, we know Gaza is largely inaccessible, but internationals have continued to journey to Israel and the West Bank. The International Solidarity Movement, community peacemaker teams, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, and Operation Dove are key examples of efforts to engage international volunteers in observing, documenting human rights violations, providing accompaniment, and working alongside Palestinians for weeks and months at a time. The Green Olive Collective provides tours of Israel and the West Bank, educational programming, and advocacy initiatives that address social issues and provide tools for change. There are religious and secular delegations to the region that encourage attendees to use their travel experience in Palestine for action and education once they return home. There are dangers. On September 6th of this year, Aysernur Ezgi from the Seattle area, a new volunteer for ISM, was shot and killed by an Israeli military sniper after an earlier afternoon protest near Nablus in the West Bank. Craig and I have had continuing contact with Aysernur's family and understand they will be in Washington, D.C. this week, seeking a U.S. investigation and accountability for Aysernur's killing. They are expected to meet with Secretary of State Antony Blinken Monday. Before I turn to Craig for a minute, I want to close with these final points shared with me by colleagues recently who have been in the West Bank, whose input should inform any of us who consider making our way now to Palestine. First, this is not a normal time in the West Bank. It is a desperate time. The situation has escalated quickly and badly and is drastically worse in every possible way than it was previously. There has been a complete erasure of the line between West Bank settlers and the Israeli military. Settlers now are armed and deputized. There have been instances where settlers attack Palestinians, then run and put on military clothing, grab a gun, and return to arrest the Palestinians. Internationals in the West Bank face many challenges. Many new road closures, new gates to small villages, checkpoints where everywhere, newly declared Israeli firing zones where only people and vehicles with Israeli-issued IDs can enter. If going to Palestine in any way, for us, witnessing should be a goal. In whatever way we go to Palestine, we should plan to return home as advocates. Internationals are so needed. Go, but know that nothing there is easy about it. Right.
I think we're about running out of time, but I'd just like to add that you should go to Palestine. I remember the first time that Cindy and I went there was actually Dr. Bill Burns, who at that time was with the State Department in the US. He's now the head of the CIA. He told us, go to Palestine, you need to see this. The Palestinians will keep you safe. Now they have for Cindy and me, but from what I understand, they can no longer do that. When you go to Palestine, they will do everything they can to keep you safe, but you need to prepare ahead of time to learn what the situation is. You need to go and plan to stay in one place for many weeks because it will take you 2 weeks probably or 10 days to figure out just how to keep yourself out of the way and not put Palestinians in harm's way. I urge you to go, but I urge you also to figure out in advance how to help the Palestinian people while you're there. And I'd also give you a heads up so when you come back, not only plan to talk to people, but find somebody that you can talk to about your situation to take care of yourself, because you'll have PTSD when you get home. So God bless you. Go there, be in solidarity with the Palestinians, but take care of yourself as you take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy and Craig. And I was actually working with ISM at the time when Rachel was in Gaza and was killed. And I just know it broke all of our hearts. But she is, as you know, an honored person, a shero basically around the whole world. She's remembered, and I know especially in Palestine, for her bravery, for her commitment. And it's just so beautiful to see you all still working for the cause on her behalf. And I know that you've also been a real friend and almost parent sometimes to Brian Avery, who was my contact, who was then targeted in Jenin in the West Bank, shot in the face, badly injured, but at least he survived. So just so much appreciation and love and gratitude to you both. Next, and our final speaker, I'd like to introduce now, and that's Mahdi Naim. He's a youth activist now living in southern Gaza. So it's amazing that Mahdi is able to join us. And he's right in the middle of the genocide and everything we've been hearing about. So his voice really we sent to last as really the most important to bookend this conversation. He actually lives and works in the area where Rachel was killed. And he has also studied media and volunteered for many years with the Palestinian Youth Association for Leadership and Rights Activation, PAYALARA. During the war, he has volunteered with them to assist students whose education has been disrupted, and he has helped provide psychological and trauma support workshops in southern Gaza displacement camps. So we are so happy to have you join us today, Mahdi. And I know it's extremely difficult beyond even our imagination. So your words and your presence are so important to us, and we're so honored that you're here.
مرحبا.
Hello,
مرحبا.
ناشط شبابي من قطاع
Mahdi
غزة.
Naim, a youth activist from the Gaza
جامعة
Strip.
فلسطين.
I
تخصص
graduated
صحافة
from
وعلاقات عامة.
Palestine University,
سنة
Press and
وثلاث
Public
شهور
Relations.
شهرين وإحنا تحت حرب.
3 months or 2 months
تحت قصف.
under
تحت
the
دمار. خوف.
shelling,
عايشين بقلق
destruction,
كتير.
bombardment,
بنفكر.
fear. We have so much
نزحنا
anxiety.
كتير كذا
We
مرة.
think a lot.
لا يوجد
We
شعور
are displaced
بالأمان
many
ولا
times.
الراحة. بالوقت اللي
We
مفروض
can't
نعيش فيه
find
إحنا
any
الشباب
comfort
ونغامر
at a time where
ونسافر
us
ونحقق
should
أحلامنا.
be living our own
قاعدين
adventures,
بنعيش
should
ببادئنا
be
ولأحلامنا.
making our dreams come true. We are living a genocide
قاعدين
of
بنعيش
us, ourselves, and
ببادئ لنا ولأحلامنا
against our
ولأصحابنا لكل
this
أشكال الحياة.
genocide against
أنا
our
فقدت أصحابي.
friends and
فقدت
all
بيتي.
types of life. I lost
فقدنا
many of
عائلتي.
my friends. I lost my home
ولكن ما
and
راح
my
أفقد
family
الأمل
members,
باللي جاي.
but I would never lose hope in the future.
الشباب في العالم بتصحى الساعة 8 الصبح.
The youth across the world
بتوجهوا
wake up
بروحوا
at 8
للجامعات
a.m.
عشان يدرسوا.
They go to
ولكن إحنا
universities
وأنا والشباب بنصحى
to
الساعة
pursue their
6
studies.
الصبح
However,
عشان
me,
نجيب
myself,
خبز.
and other
عشان
wake up
نجيب
at
مية
6
نشرب.
a.m. to try to look or to find water to drink and to find
خلال
bread.
الحرب تطوعت مع مؤسسة بيلارا.
During the war, I volunteered with
قدمنا
Pialara.
دعم نفسي وأنشطة ترفيهية للأطفال.
We
وأنشطة
provided
تعليمية.
the mental support and entertainment and educational activities to children
يتذكروا
to
دراستهم.
help them
يتذكروا كيف المدرسة كانت.
remember
ركزنا على مواد بعض
their
المواد من
studies,
اللغة
their
العربية مع اللغة
education,
الإنجليزية
how school used to
والرياضيات.
be focused on Arabic language, English
جربنا
language,
كل
and
أنواع
maths.
العذاب. إحنا
We
فعليا
tried
عذاب
all sorts
نفسي،
of
عذاب جسدي، سواء فينا أو
torture,
في أصحابنا أو
mental,
في أهلنا.
physical torture, whether
وكنا
in us
عايشين
or
على
other
بعد
friends
الأمل
or our families,
من
or
سنة وشهرين.
we were living on
وإحنا
some
حاليا
hope
عايشين على
since
أمل
more than
تاني إنه الحرب
1 year,
تقف
a year
بس
and 2
عشان
months.
نرتاح
Now
شوي.
we have another
إحنا
hope that
موافقين
the
الحرب
war
تقف
stops so that we
لو
can have
يوم
some
واحد. إحنا
rest.
موافقين بس
We
إنه
want the
نرتاح
war to
ما
stop
نسمع
only
قصف.
for one
ما
day.
نشوف
We'd never
شهداء
reject that.
على
We
أرضنا.
don't want to
ما
hear any
نشوف أطفال
bombardment. We don't want to see martyrs
تقطع
on the ground. We
قدامنا
don't
كل
want to
يوم.
see children being
بيجي موضوع
amputated
تاني،
every
موضوع إنك
day.
تعيش في خيمة.
The other
تعيش
thing
في
is that
خيمة
if
في
living in a
الصيف
tent, to live in
بتموت
a
من
tent
الشوب
in summer,
وبالشتاء
you would
بتموت من
be
الغرق.
feeling so hot, extremely hot,
قبل
and in
كم
winter
يوم
you would be
في شتاء
drowning in
علينا
water, in rainwater.
فالمية
A couple of
دخلت
days
على
ago,
الخيم
it was raining.
فضلنا
The
صاحيين
water
طول
leaked
اليوم
into
ما
the
عرفنا ننام.
tents, through the tents, so we were awake all day. We were unable to sleep.
أنا كشاب من قطاع غزة كان عندي كتير
As
أحلام
a young
بس
man
أحلامنا
from the
اتدمرت.
Gaza Strip, I had so
صارت
many
أحلامنا اليوم
dreams that were all
حاليا إنه نشرب مية نظيفة.
devastated.
يعني أنا صرت
Today,
أحلم إن أنا أقدر
my
أشرب
dream
مية
is to
نظيفة،
have
إني آكل
access
أكل
to
نظيف.
clean drinking water, to
امبارح
eat
أنا قطعت
clean food.
مسافة 3 ساعات
Yesterday,
3 ساعات
I
بس
walked
علشان
3
أقدر أشيل
hours
طحين
just
لأهلي عشان
to be able
يخبزوا.
to bring flour
مسافة
to my
3 ساعات.
family to bake, to make
مع كل
some
هذا الوضع احنا
bread.
بنعيشه
3
ونحن
hours of
واثقين
walking.
ومتأكدين إنه في أمل في
We are
النهاية،
pretty
إنه نجد أمل
confident
من
that
تاني،
there is
في
hope
أمل
at
عشان
the end
نشوف
of the road,
أصحابنا، في أمل
that we
لأرجع
can get
أشتغل
together
بحقوقي
again,
فيها،
that we can
في
see
أمل
our
نحقق كل
friends
اللي احنا
to
بنحلم فيه وكل
access
اللي احنا بدنا إياه.
job opportunities,
أنا وكل شباب
to
فلسطين،
achieve our
أنا
dreams,
وخاصة
and
شباب
everything
قطاع
that we,
غزة.
I myself and the
حيحكوا لي
youth
كثير
of
ناس إنه أنت
Palestine,
ليش ما سافرت أنت
particularly the youth
وأهلك
of Gaza
في
Strip.
الحرب؟ موضوع
People
إنك
might
تسافر
be
في
asking,
الحرب
why
هذا
did you leave
موضوع
with
كثير
your
مكلف.
family? Why didn't you leave your
لازم تدفع
country? Why didn't
مبلغ
you depart?
غالي وغير هيك أنت
This is
ممكن
very
تسافر
costly.
ما
You
يروح
have to
معك.
pay
ف
a lot of
اللي احنا
money in
بنطلبه
order
نحن
to
سواء
leave
كنا
your homeland.
عايشين إنه
What
نضلنا
we want
مكملين
if we were
حياتنا
alive
ويكون في
to
عنا أمل.
continue with our
يكون
life
هذا الأمل سواء عبارة
and to
عن
have
حلم
hope,
يتحقق،
to
عبارة عن
maintain the hope,
وظيفة، عبارة عن
regardless it's
سكن، عبارة
a
عن
dream
طلعة سفر،
to
عبارة عن
come
زواج.
true,
هذه
a
أحلامنا
job,
إحنا حاليا الشباب الفلسطيني.
housing,
وشكرا
marriage,
لكم.
travel. These are our main dreams as Palestinian youth. Thank you.
Shukran, Yahmati. Again, we are all with you. Our hearts are with you. And I think it's really important. Many of the solidarity, sayings is, we are not here to feel sorry for you, to pity you. You are an amazing ability to resist and live and hang in there, but we are here to act in solidarity with you for human rights and justice, and to stop this genocide and to stop the suffering that you're going through, which is just unbearable. And as we know, the only real live stream genocide in history. So it's so important to listen to all the actions that people have been calling for, to get out there, as Phyllis said, and work on our own countries, whether it's for the arms embargo, whether it's for a change in laws, whether it's for supporting humanitarian initiatives. We also need to make sure we get there and you go visit and we act as unarmed civilian protective accompaniers when we can to the region, so that we can be there and witness and support in solidarity what's happening also in the West Bank. And then also Mazen's call to come visit, to act, to become part of his huge network where he updates on many, many actions that are taking place and putting our bodies on the line. So thank you, Shukran Mahdi, for being here, and Muhammad especially from Gaza. And I now want to start. We're ready for the question and answer session. We'll have about 12 minutes, and then we will have a closing. So anyone that would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand and ask it directly to any or all of the speakers, or if you'd like to put it in the chat, we can, Sean and I will kind of try to be tracking the questions. So
Looks like
Norma says, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. Why don't you go ahead, Sean, and I'll take the next one. And then we've got a lot of hands raised, so go
Sure,
ahead.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, Norma's written in the chat, how do you see the upcoming U.S. administration and the new reality in Syria impacting the future of Palestine? Please also address the intersection of Christian nationalism and Zionism. I'm not sure. I guess this question is open to any and all speakers who would like to respond to it. Do we want to collect a few of the questions and then we give the word over to the speakers?
I would just say let's go ahead with that one. And then there's some, other issues coming up. So a lot of people raising their hands. So go ahead. Anyone that would like to answer that. Mazen.
Well, probably Phyllis has something to say about that, but very briefly for me, I would say the U.S. empire is on the decline, has been on the decline for about 4 decades, and Israel is accelerating this decline by having Washington, D.C. as another Israeli-occupied territory. And I think you can see this in the effect on the U.S. economy and the national debt that's now $24 trillion. Half of it is due to wars waged in the Middle East, not for the benefit of the U.S., but for the a delusional benefit that it helps Israel, but it's not really helping Israel either, as we saw with the $3 trillion war on Iraq. So I see the situation accelerating demise of the U.S. empire under Trump. And I guess within 2 years in the midterm elections, you will see significant changes in the U.S. But anyways, for us, people of the global South and the global North also who are working hard, we work against empire and against Zionism and against colonialism, regardless of why it's perpetuated and by whoever it's perpetuated. So that's what we will continue to do.
Okay, Shukran Mazen. I'm going to go to Phyllis next. Phyllis, if you'd like to add anything to that question, and there's another one in the chat for you specifically. How can we in the USA pressure our government to get on board with the UN resolutions regarding Palestine? Thank you. And then we'll go to Norbert and Mansour and anyone else that has their hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think the key questions right now are for what can we be doing? And I think that goes directly to meeting with members of Congress. That there's going to be the break coming up in a few days. Members of Congress will be in your districts, particularly those that will be coming back into Congress in the next term. This is your opportunity to meet with them while they're in your district, but also build those relations with their staff. That's important as well. And the key thing here is to focus on what is possible in this incredibly difficult context. The resolution that was that won 19 votes in the Senate recently, which is not nearly enough to pass, but that was 40% of the Democrats who supported Bernie Sanders' proposal for a set of joint resolutions of disapproval of aid to Israel. That was absolutely unprecedented. Remind your members of Congress of that they can do that, and it is not political suicide. People in Washington live in a bubble. They don't read the regular newspapers. They read a one-page summary sheet that their staff prepares for them that mainly is about what's happening in their local paper that mentions them. So among other things, if you write a letter to the editor, mention your member of Congress. Condemn them if they've voted badly, which most of them usually do. Thank them profusely for those few who support human rights, Palestinian rights, international law, but remind them that we are obligated as a country to abide by rulings of the International Court of Justice, that we are obligated as members of the United Nations to implement resolutions that are taken, and that their claim that this is all about Israeli self-defense is simply not going to, it's not going to fly. It's not accurate in international law. There is no justification for acts of collective punishment, for instance, under any circumstances, whether or not there have been horrific crimes committed as there were inside Gaza in some instances on October 7th. That is not an excuse that will fly. So I think it is important. Somebody just asked me also in the chat about another set of talking points. There are some good talking points out there. I'll try and get out another set. I also have a new book coming out in the next couple of weeks called Understanding Palestine and Israel that has a whole section on the international law issues, the consequences of the genocide, what the genocide is about, the obligations of the United States, et cetera. It may be useful for some of you. But right now, a lot of the organizations that are working, whether it's the groups like IMEU, the Institute for Middle East Understanding, and so many others, are putting out on a daily basis responses, talking points, how to reach members of Congress. All of those things are crucial. Stay on top of all of them, but set up meetings now. Call your offices tomorrow to find out when will the member be back? When can I get a meeting with them to talk about what are they going to do? It's not enough to say we are devastated by the humanitarian consequences, but we're trying as hard as we can for a ceasefire. They are not, because the only thing that will bring about a ceasefire is an end to US military support. Stop sending weapons. That's the key talking point. Stop sending the weapons. And meet with your member of Congress. Make that your talking point. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you. Mansour, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to unmute and ask your question? And we'd love to see you on video too, if you can do a video. Mansour, would you like to unmute?
I think they have to be given permission to unmute from our host for the meeting today, David. If you're able to, I think you can just click ask to unmute and then they should be able to speak.
I hear you and I can, and I'm desperately trying to do it as fast as I can.
You got it, Dave. You have me.
Good, we've got you. Go ahead, Mansour.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I know many of you. I have recorded many of you in the past. I live in Long Beach, California, Los Angeles area. Just want to share with you solidarity, what we do, as what Professor Norman Finkelstein says all the time. Israel would not be able to take one breath without U.S. support. So what we do in Long Beach, Whittier, Orange County, and San Pedro, we do banner dropping over the freeway, and we get a lot of support that way. So solidarity, calling your Congress is really good, but solidarity on the ground with people, organizing community is one of the best actions we can do in order to reach as a community to our quote unquote representative, or better yet, elected officials. We should use the word elected officials more than representative, because we can always vote them out. So we do that in solidarity, and in solidarity with Palestinians. Wear your keffiyeh, wear your lapel, wear your pen, engage, engage, engage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mansoor. Okay, we're going to Norbert, and we've just got like about 5 more minutes. So please keep all your comments. So far, they've been great, short and to the point, and hopefully a question as well. Go ahead, Norbert.
Yes, hi together, and thank you for another great webinar. I just want to draw your attention to Better World Info, who has collected a huge source of information over the past year. It's in the chat, betterworldinfo/Gaza War. We are open for input, of course, especially from your experts. And I recommend to use it, even though it seems to be slightly big. It might be useful for special information and sharing and networking. So kind invitation to everybody, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Sean?
Yeah, we're just going to quickly mention, I think, the other questions that we have in the chat here before turning it over to our speakers for any remarks. I'm sorry, I've kind of got lost. We have a lot going on in the chat right now, so I'm scrolling back. Sorry for the delays.
We can go, while you're looking, let's go to Mohi and Muntazar, and then you'll find the ones in the chat, and that'll be the last. So Mohi, go ahead.
Hi, this is Moji. Not
Moji, sorry.
That's okay. I am an Iranian American peace and, of course, Palestine activist for decades, and I'm in Boulder, Colorado. And the comment I have is, inside Iran, every time I hear, especially young people, expressing solidarity with Netanyahu, and out of frustration of the regime in Iran behaving so horribly. And I tell them, look, these two regimes are codependent as enemies. So we, as nonviolence activists, peace activists, need to condemn their behaviors both. And so this is something that I think a lot of times people fall into the trap of, one side or the other. And I think as peace and human rights activists, if we do not equally recognize their interdependence, of Dr. Mossadegh of Iran said, internal despotism and external colonialism are two sides of the same coin, especially when they need one another as enemy. So we need to pay attention to that. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
I would love to hear Phyllis, especially her reflections on this.
Okay. Or the two youth leaders from Gaza, or Cindy or Craig, who haven't yet spoken. So Phyllis, do you have any feedback for that?
Only that it's, of course, important to show the relationship between countries that are all involved in various ways in internal repression and external repression of Palestinians. So yeah, I mean, people in Iran have a huge movement to build and a huge challenge ahead of them, as do people in this country, in the United States. And the direct support that our government, the United States government, uses to enable the Israeli imposition of genocide against Palestinians, I think right now, for us, is the single most important focus of our work. And that means both mobilization at the grassroots level and at the congressional level, and with the media. We have a huge amount of work to do.
Great, thank you. Any other speakers like to respond? We're probably just going to go just a few minutes over since there's so many questions and so much interest.
I think I would just like to add what Martin Luther King had said, that the biggest purveyor of violence in the world is our own country, that is the United States of America. And since 1945, millions of people were killed thanks to this country, to the governance of this country. Iran, Russia, any other country you like or dislike, but they are minuscule compared to the destruction wrought about by this government.
Okay. Shukran, Mazen. Muntazar, yes, go ahead. Or Muntasar, go ahead.
Marhaba. Hello.
Marhaba.
First, I want to thank all of speakers and who do this meeting. I'm Muntasir Abdullah, a young lawyer from Bethlehem, Palestine. And first thing I want to say, shukran for Cindy and Craig, this great family who give us the hope always when we listen for them words and when we see them. And I just want to say, if we stand as humans together, we will win together. But if we stand with the war, we will lose everything. And the last thing, my salam for all, and wish this year the Christmas be better than the last year, and the next year, inshallah, the peace be in all the world. And thank you.
This is Cindy, and I just want to say how heartening it's been to spend this time with you and to be connected in this way throughout the world really gives us such great energy and encouragement for all the hard work that we have to do in this country. And I also want to say it's such a gift to spend time always with people in Gaza. And yeah, we stand with you every day, every moment of every day. Yeah, just hope that somehow we find a better path through 2025, the new year. And I want to say that also our mentors, Phyllis and Mazen, it's so wonderful to spend time with all of you and to be guided by your wise knowledge and information and experience. Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. We have a few questions and we'll just give a few minutes here. I hope people don't mind that we go a little bit over our time, but it's been such a lovely conversation and many great questions we've had here. So just quickly going through, there's 3 questions I've seen. One is directed towards Phyllis, but I think it could also perhaps be a task that we work on as our global coalition that we have for peace in Palestine here. Can you publish some talking points to be able to speak to senators, representatives, government officials? I think that's something very interesting. I'm sure there are already some that exist. Maybe we can also post in the chat, but perhaps working on something that can come out of conversations like today. Another question which has an answer, but I think it's worth highlighting quickly, is Laura had asked the best way to contribute financial resources for people in Gaza. And Mazen had replied that we have the website ongaza.org, and we is not the coalition, sorry, but it is ongaza, ongaza.org, for credible organizations to donate to. And finally, the question from, and excuse me if I mispronounce the name here, but Mahbub Hussein, who has asked how to unite people in the Middle East for a free Palestine. I think those are the final questions we'll have if anyone would like to address any of those.
I just want to, since it's quiet, I just want to say how honored I am to be with you and how grateful we are in Palestine for the massive solidarity that we see around the world. I can tell you from what people tell me in Gaza that they are so grateful. It keeps them going to see this. And so it's essential. Please keep it up. Please act in however small way you do, you're still contributing to actions that save us as a species, not just the Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mazen. Did any of our other speakers want to give any final remarks?
And with Mazen's last point, it was important.
Great. Well, then we will go to now our closing remarks for the session today. The closing remarks will be presented by Marta Inés Romero, who is the Secretary General of Pax Christi, the Global Catholic Movement for Peace and Nonviolence, and a historic partner for us at IPB, among many others I know. She studied conflict transformation at the Kroc Institute for Peace in the US and works tirelessly for dialogue and connection throughout Latin America and indeed all over the world. Marta, the final word is over to you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Greetings from Colombia. We continue waving this fabric of humanity for a just peace for the Palestinians. I will present some ideas about our reflection today, just to leave it as a roadmap for us in the coalition to continue struggling and working for a just peace in Palestine. So thanks to the speakers, invitees, it is our Global Solidarity for Peace in Palestine Coalition and our second or third webinar. So we, the main message is we as civil society organizations should have a very good voice in the power to advocate for just peace for Palestinians. Our main demands: United States must stop its foreign policy against Palestine, stop sending weapons. And this is something that we all around the world are supporting you, US citizens. Second, the states independently and by regional groups should continue acting to stop the genocide. The Israeli, the South African and other countries that are rejecting those ships, those small businesses about the war, etc., should continue. It is our role as civil society organizations to continue put a pressure on them. Then the United Nations SCR's Security Council Resolution 377, the right to peace and autonomy, is the roadmap or a tool to avoid continuing frustrated by the veto power. Then the cease omnicide in Gaza, something that we were reflecting on the COP16 on biodiversity in Cali, my country, Colombia, and also in the COP19 in Azerbaijan. Because omnicide in Gaza and those places where the war industry are poisoning inhabitants, it's a real, huge problem for the climate crisis, for humanity, and for all our Mother Earth. Then to continue reflection on interconnectedness between Gaza, Lebanon, and Syrian conflicts. We presented the first webinar, three main axes about our work. Then the humanitarian crisis, it is, as it has been said today, not a normal time yet. Then conditions for a transition, the issue of diplomacy, strategic keys for effective influence to change the situation. And Craig and Cindy has put again the word accompaniment. And then our advocacy actions as coalition. So for the first time, I would say that the issue is that an immediate and permanent ceasefire to establish and secure humanitarian aid corridors and to continue the peer-to-peer global solidarity, volunteering to show the stronger solidarity by popular movements and civil society organizations, all our faith-based networks. So the issue of accompaniment is again here. Then related to the conditions for a transition, urgent actions towards US government and our own countries and the United Nations to push for a transition, that it implies reconstruction, to reunite families, health including trauma healing, monitor and document for the future justice, truth, and reparation for those victims of this genocide, of this tragedy. And then the right for those at the diaspora, for refugees that have the right to have all access to health, education, protection, etc. And related to the third one, our campaign to target boycotts, sanctions, and divestments, particularly against illegal occupations in the occupied Palestine territories, the establishment of an arms embargo on Israel and all our actions against military expenditure against civilians, including biodiversity affectations by the war industry. Then the stopping of Israel's presence from the General Assembly until it complies with international law, and to hold Israel accountable for its continued violations of the Genocide Convention. And last reflection, our accompaniment to the Palestinians for the Sumud, the life to resist. So it is not an issue of only people at the Holy Land. It is a humanity issue. So all of us should be involved in actions to promote a just peace for Palestinians. Although the high level of suffering, Palestinians are resisting, asking for their rights as refugees, advocating for a returning and reconstruction process. We continue the call for hope. Although there is no normal life in Gaza, sorry, we continue being built on the basis of the strongest cultural resistance by Palestinians and our international solidarity. We continue activating our faith, our moral values, our humanity, committed with our Palestinian brothers and sisters for a better future. We continue with our key message for now: end the occupation. And we ratify a common voice. We are interconnected. So the mobilization, it is without rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marta. And just to close out very quickly with a huge thank you to Igor Rodriguez and all of the interpreters who have helped to facilitate this meeting in a large number of languages, and hopefully growing also in future events. And to all of the members of our planning committee, including Susan Smith, the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, Kathy Kelly, World Beyond War, Rick Jones, the Presbyterian General Assembly, and Hania Bitar, and Oz Merhim of Pialara, and also a special thanks to David Swanson and World Beyond War for hosting the Zoom and all of the tech for today. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a good night, day, and we keep moving forward all together.
Yep. Let's end, if you want, those that can unmute. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. All right. Thank you, everyone.